Okay, everybody, welcome to the show. This is the Otherppl podcast. I'm Brad Listi, and I'm here in Los Angeles. How's it going out there? Hope you're hanging in there. Thank you for being here. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen. You can also subscribe on YouTube, and you can follow me on social media, Bluesky and Instagram. So it is Sunday, and as such, it is time for another Character Studies episode. Character Studies happen on Sundays, and they feature interviews with ordinary people who appear on this show anonymously, talking with me about their lives. Today, I'm going to be speaking with a 38-year-old social worker from Portland, Maine, named Tyler. I had a great conversation with Tyler, and that is coming up. Today's episode is brought to you by Mulholland Books, publisher of the novel Buzzkill by J. Robert Lennon. It is the official May pick of my book club, the Otherppl Book Club. You should sign up for my book club. I'm just saying, you can do that over at otherppl.com. Buzzkill is a book about the Poole sisters, private investigators who find out that their Aunt Ruth, who committed suicide more than a decade ago, it might not have been what it seemed. Maybe Aunt Ruth didn't commit suicide. Buzzkill is a gripping novel that shows J. Robert Lennon at the height of his powers. Check it out. Get your copy wherever books are sold, available right now from Mulholland Books. Once again, the book is called Buzzkill by J. Robert Lennon. So don't forget that I do a weekly email newsletter. Sign up for it over at Substack, bradlisti.substack.com. And be sure to check out my new company, which will be launching later this year. It is called Deep Dive. It specializes in the creation of long-form educational audio. And the debut course from Deep Dive is called How to Write a Novel. I am the host, and the course will feature more than 50 hours of never-before-heard conversations with dozens of today's leading writers like Melissa Broder, Emily St. John Mandel, Tiffany Clark Harrison, Porchista Hakpour, Lynn Steger Strong, Madeline Lucas, Matt Bell, Matthew Salasis, Steve Almond. The list goes on. It's going to be really cool. And it's in the works. I'm in post-production right now on this course, and I will keep you posted as to when the official launch is happening. For now, you can check out the landing page over at the Deep Dive website, www.deepdive.audio. Sign up for the Deep Dive newsletter so that you can stay informed about the company and its imminent launch. You can also follow Deep Dive on Instagram and Bluesky. All right, so today's character study once again features a conversation with Tyler, a 38-year-old social worker from Portland, Maine. A reminder that character studies episodes are anonymous. My guests appear by first name only. These are not writers. These are not media figures. These are not people on some kind of promotional tour. They're just people talking with me candidly about their lives. So if you're out there and you or someone you know fits this bill and you think they'd be a great guest for this series and they'd be willing to talk with me anonymously and in candor, you can email me. The address is letters@otherppl.com, and we'll see what happens. So I'm very excited right now, ladies and gentlemen, to share with you the 9th character study in the history of this program.
Hi, my name's Tyler. I'm 38 years old, and I am a social worker. I was born in Maine, in a small city called Lewiston, Maine. I grew up in a even smaller town in rural Maine called Monmouth, and I lived there all through high school, and I've lived in Portland for the most part ever since. So I am a Mainer going back very, very far. In fact, I found out recently that I'm like a 13th or 14th generation Mainer after doing some ancestry research. So I'm a hardcore Mainer, I would say, which is kind of, there's some pride there, but also it's kind of weird in a lot of ways.
I was going to say, well, like, because Maine it's not a place you drive through. Like, you have to mean to go to Maine. Do you know what I'm saying? Because of the way that it's geographically situated up there at the top right, at the northeast corner. You don't drive through it. You got to go to it. And it's a beautiful place. I'm curious to know, as somebody with such deep roots there and who, somebody who has spent his whole life there, like, how would you characterize, like, broadly speaking, a Mainer? Like, what are people from Maine like?
Well, it's kind of complicated. Maine is very, I guess, like, politically split down the middle. Not that necessarily is a good way to describe a group of people, but there's coastal Maine. Going up the coast is like pretty cool. Good art scenes in all the towns going up the coast. Feel pretty good about the politics. Once you get inland, the nature remains beautiful. You start to see maybe some political signs that you're not super jiving with. But as far as being a Mainer, I don't know. I think there's there's a certain fortitude, I think, like we were discussing earlier with the weather. The seasons are pretty extreme here, mostly on the cold end. And winter goes out. Today's May 1st. I feel like winter just ended like a few days ago. So you kind of have to really have a little bit of grit to get through a lot of the seasons here. And then summer in Maine is gorgeous, and that's what a lot of people live for. But I think Mainers are known for being pretty hardworking, good people for the most part. That's what I would like to think. But it's hard to sort of see that from the inside. There's also a reputation for Mainers being very gatekeepy about things, and being very suspicious of all the vacationers and outsiders, and that's kind of like there's some truth to that, but that's maybe not such a great trait.
Did it shift? I feel like during the pandemic, everybody, like all these like rich New Yorkers, were like fleeing for Maine. Isn't that what happened, or no?
That is exactly what happened. Yeah. It's in Portland specifically, the level of drama that has gone with like the change here just since the pandemic is pretty alarming. It's impossible to find affordable housing in Portland. And, it also has like one of the hottest restaurant scenes on the face of the earth. And we have just an extreme housing crisis like everywhere, but it's ramped up a lot in the last few years. So it's kind of typical for people to be not so psyched about the sort of outsider population having exploded so much in the last 5 years. But at the same time, it's just Portland becoming more of like an actual city, because that happens everywhere.
Yeah, over time. So, you were born in Lewiston. Isn't Lewiston a college town?
Kind of, yeah. Bates College is there. I was born there just because that was the closest hospital to the town I grew up in. Yeah, it's a college town. It's very small. Maine is like kind of one big small town in a lot of ways, especially southern Maine. Maine is huge. You could drive like 7 hours and not even be in Canada yet. It's massive, but kind of, I would say anything like around the Augusta, sort of Lewiston, Auburn area below there is kind of just like one big sort of, they call it like Greater Portland, I guess. But there's like a big small town feel to the whole state, I would say.
And what were your parents doing? Like when you're born in Lewiston, like were they academics? Like and you have all this history in Maine. Is there like a family business or tradition that kind of carried through the generations?
Yeah, kind of, actually, yes. My dad did own a small business. He had a company that manufactured ice fishing equipment, like high-end ice fishing equipment. They did some ice fishing in Wisconsin.
Oh,
Did
sure,
they
yeah.
not?
My brother-in-law, my wife is from Minnesota, and my brother-in-law
Yeah.
has lived up there his whole life, and he ice fishes.
Yeah. So I know a lot of people elsewhere in the country use like little jigging poles and stuff for ice fishing. Up here, they use things called traps or tip ups. It's like basically just a device that has a flag on it. When the fish takes the bait, the reel moves, the flag goes up, you go haul the fish in by hand. Ice fishing is huge up here. And my dad's side of the family definitely was a long line of fishermen. And my dad did lots of different jobs throughout his life. I would say we were, lower middle class, kind of a big family. And he got hurt in the 90s working in a kind of like a mill manufacturing job. And he had this sort of side business making ice fishing equipment. And because he got hurt, he was out of work and needed to support our family of 6. And so he made his side job of making ice fishing traps his main job. And he built it up from there. And I worked for him since I could walk, basically, in different capacities. And it's definitely, when I think about my childhood, I think about being out on the lake with my dad and building traps and having kind of just like a simple rural life, which I look back on that and appreciate that, because I don't really feel like I feel like I have a very different life now, but I think it's good that I came from where I did.
Yeah, I have kind of a similar feeling. Not exactly the same, but I grew up in suburbia, like in the Midwest. It was pretty simple. There was a lot, especially in Wisconsin, there was a lot of access to the outdoors, kind of like a free childhood. I had one of those childhoods where I could like just leave my house in the morning and come back in the evening, like that kind of thing, which doesn't really exist as much anymore. But I can idealize it too, like this idea of some sort of bucolic existence. And when it comes to Maine and ice fishing and your dad's business and just the act of ice fishing in general, it's kind of like a nice social thing. Like I see videos and pictures of, my brother-in-law will be ice fishing, or I'll just stumble into it somehow. It's kind of like there's a hole in the ice, and then there's these lines that are kind of going down into the hole. And then there's like 2 people sitting there drinking, usually.
Yep. Yeah. That's, a lot of people call it ice drinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a very social thing for a lot of people up here. And it's definitely a class. I don't know, like I would say ice fishing is associated with a certain class of people, maybe a class that I certainly came from. I wish I did more fishing as an adult, but I was never as into it as an adult as, my dad was, obviously. But I did so much of it when I was young that I really sort of hold on to those memories pretty tight, because I think it kind of, even though it's not something that I do so much anymore, I feel like it still kind of shaped who I became as an adult.
How so?
I don't know. I identify as, I would say, an artist primarily in my adulthood, and someone who, I try to lead like an intellectual sort of lifestyle, and that's all well and good. But it was nice to just know where I came from and just have lived, the first half of my life just very differently. And it was a more humble existence. And I admire people who came from that and continue to do that. I feel like I understand them, even though I kind of don't really identify with them so much anymore. I just feel like I have an understanding of what it's like to be sort of a rural Mainer, because that's how I started.
What about your mom? Like, your dad's out ice fishing, you're with him, you're working for him and with him on this company as a kid. What was your mom up to?
My mom, she was a babysitter when I was a kid. So we would have other kids around, kids that became my friends. Then she started working in public school at the town next door. She eventually became she was basically a school nurse in the town next door, a nurse's aide, but she was the school nurse. And she did that for many, many years. She would see kids, when they were 5 years old. And then, in a small town school system, you kind of see them grow up all the way. So she worked with kids, whether it was babysitting or in the school. She's a very family-oriented, kid-loving, wonderful woman.
So a good mom.
Oh, yeah. The best.
How many, do you have any siblings?
I have 3 older sisters.
Ah.
So I was the youngest, and it was kind of funny, like having my big manly dad and then my 3 sisters who would like to like dress me up and whatever. So a lot of people tell me that after when they're getting to know me, they'll and they've learned that I have 3 sisters, they'll be like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
I get that too. I'm in between 2 girls. I have an older and a younger sister, but I grew up with girls.
I take that as a compliment when people tell me that it makes sense, because I don't know. I think that it means something good when they say that, at least in terms of how one exists around women. I don't really know, but yeah, 3 older sisters. They're all cool. We all still get along. They all still live nearby, and yeah, it was honestly a very fortunate upbringing, I would say.
Like, so no crazy rebellion or bitterness or.
I mean, I couldn't wait to get out of the town I was from. Nothing crazy rebellious. I would get in trouble. We had to kind of make our own fun, get in trouble doing stupid shit, kind of typical small town stuff. And, I longed to even though where I am now is only an hour away from where I grew up. Portland's really a pretty cool town and an actual city, a small one, but it is a real city. And as far as I was concerned, when I was a kid, it was like sign me up. I just want to be there around, people and culture and stuff. That I was pretty, honestly, by the time I was, at the end of high school, I'd had enough of everything at that point, and I was ready to get out of there, and have a sort of different experience. But nothing crazy rebellion wise, just some mischief, I would say, mostly.
And were you in one of these? I mean, it was a small town, so were you in school with the same kids all the way through, basically?
Pretty much. Yep. I had my graduating class was 40, I think, 40 kids.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you're like, get me the fuck out of here.
Yeah,
tired of these people.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, that sounds shitty, but kind of true. I mean, I'm still friends with a solid handful of people that I grew up with, and that's great. But I still go back all the time too. My mom still lives there, and it's only an hour away, so I'm still up there all the time for one reason or another.
But it's just insular, and you're an adolescent. You want to kind of get out and see other stuff. Like, that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you had mentioned that your dad got hurt in the 90s, like, which kind of caused him to kind of go all in on this ice fishing business. Mm-hmm. Like, what was the injury? I'm curious.
He was in a place that was manufacturing like refrigeration parts. I can't remember exactly what he did, but he lifted something and he just totally fucked up his back, like, permanently, and had major surgeries. And there was a workers' comp lawsuit that I think he lost. So it was just it was kind of dire situation for my family. And actually, LL Bean kind of saved the day for us. They picked up my dad's product in the mid to late 90s. And that was a big deal, for the business. And that kind of saved our ass, I would say.
Wow. Yeah. Cause you're talking about this like an ice fishing business. And I am forever fascinated by how people make their livings. Like, there is somebody on this earth, for example, who has made a fortune selling pencil erasers. Like, how do you get into that racket? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just one example, but there's just so many different ways and so many different like weird markets out there. I'm curious to know, like, is the ice fishing market big enough to build like a really viable business? It sounds like it was.
Well, it was, we still scraped by for a long time. I was obviously the last to leave the house as the youngest. And by the time I got out of high school, things were pretty okay. But there were financial struggles, no doubt, like throughout my whole childhood. My parents didn't fight that much, but when they did, it was about money. So the business was, I think my dad loved the freedom of being his own boss and doing what he loved. But it certainly wasn't like he wasn't exactly like printing money he was working 7 days a week, 14-hour days, really putting the work in. But he built it up, and over time he did build it up into a hell of a business, and he sold it. My dad died about 4.5, almost 5 years ago. And a couple of years before that, he did sell the business, and it was, he had done very well up at that point.
That's awesome. And what did it make? Just like ice fish, because you don't have like an ice fishing rod, do you?
No, they're called like tip ups. It's basically like 3 pieces of hardwood that are like coated in polyurethane and like stainless steel parts, and it kind of folds out, so the reel goes underwater, and then it's propped up by 2 of the pieces of wood. The other piece of wood goes up. There's a flag attached that kind of bends over, and once the fish takes the bait, the reel turns, that trips the flag, so the flag goes up, and then you have a fish.
And he created that.
Well, it was an old. He didn't create the design. He kind of like perfected it, I would say. It was a design that had been around for probably hundreds of years, but he made the best one with like a lifetime guarantee. And that's why LL Bean picked us up, because it was the best. And the business is still going. Other people own it now, but it's the business did so well because the quality was it was the like highest quality of that thing that you could find on the face of the earth.
And when you look back on your childhood, there's obviously the siblings, there's the small town life, there's the ice fishing, there's your dad's like injury and his business and all of that. Is there anything else that you point to that you would consider to be formative in your childhood, something that really made you who you are?
Well, I'd always kind of reluctantly played sports throughout my younger years. And then by the time I got to high school, I was really reluctantly playing. And I finally, I joined a band when I was a freshman in high school. And that became my extracurricular activity. I joined a band with some older kids, like an actual garage band.
Wait. And like, what was it called, and what instrument did you play?
The band was called Carlisle, and I played bass in the band. And it was formative because I essentially haven't stopped being in bands and playing music since, and that was 24 years ago. So I basically just fell in love with music and creating music right when I got into high school. I'd been playing a bit before high school, but once I started like collaborating with other people, starting to write songs, obviously it took many years after that to actually get good, but the practice and the process was something that I fell in love with very early on, making music.
What kind of music did Carlisle play?
Oh God. It was actually pretty original. I wouldn't say it was very good, but it was original. We would play Battle of the Bands, like statewide Battle of the Bands. I'm not avoiding the question of what kind of music we played, because I don't really know how to describe it. Kind of like garage pop, but we also had a saxophone player, and our singer had a really weird kind of nasally voice. And it was kind of joke songs, but kind of serious also. Obviously would be unlistenable now but it was really fun at the time. So I don't know. I would say just like a scrappy garage pop band, I guess.
It had to be like, you guys had to be like the only act in your 40-person like class, right? You were the only band?
Absolutely. In the whole school, yeah. The other guys in the band were a couple years older than me, and I'm still friends with a couple of them. But yeah, we were the only game in town. We would play some school dances and, play the school talent shows, and we thought we were pretty cool, I guess, even though we, were huge nerds, but that's, it was fun.
Did you guys have a look? Like, did you have like an aesthetic?
Old man thrift store clothes, maybe. I don't know. For some reason, we used to go to Salvation Army on the weekends, and I would just, for some reason, I was drawn to clothes that were previously owned by 85-year-old guy. That was my look, at least. The other guys probably one of the guys was a huge Deadhead hippie, even though that didn't have anything to do with the music we were playing. So he had a very tie-dye look.
Oh, yeah. I used to go thrifting in like my youth, and like I would get like T-shirts, and like they would always have some weird smell to them. Like what was I thinking?
Yeah, I guess ironic T-shirts would be the other thing to our look. Things that were just like so and such family reunion 1985, and we just thought that we were so original and funny for wearing such silly ironic things.
And it was just school dances. You didn't like tour the state of Maine or anything.
Hell no. We would play shows at like some like Legion Hall shows, and we did play some actual gigs with other like younger bands sometimes, but I think it was more about the camaraderie and the fun of like creating. I remember we went to the studio to record. It's deep in the woods in this small town in Maine. It was so weird. It was called Baked Beans Recording Studio, and we recorded like a demo EP there. This really weird old guy with a huge gray beard, but it was a real studio, and it was like the coolest thing ever to us to be like, wow, we're in a real studio. Looking back on it, it's just like, what the hell was going on?
This guy could have killed you all.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
The legendary Baked Beans recording studio in the woods of Maine.
Mm-hmm.
So what about the name Carlisle? What's the origin of that?
There was a salad bar in our cafeteria. There's a plastics company called Carlisle, which if you look at the bottom of like a red like soda cup at like Pizza Hut or at some cafeteria, you'll see Carlisle on there. But there was the salad bar in our high school cafeteria was called the Continental Carlisle, and we thought that was really funny. So that was actually the original name, but then we shortened it to Carlisle.
And give me the name of like a Carlisle original track.
Okay. Full Frontal Rudity. Yes, it was I didn't write that one. My friend wrote it. It was a breakup song where he was, his heart was broken, and it was, he thought it was very rude of his girlfriend to break up with him like that. So the song was called Full Frontal Rudity. And you guys are like a bunch of nerds in like 80-year-old thrift store clothes, but you're in like a band. Like, did that help you socially? Like, were you getting girls and stuff because of this, or no? Absolutely not. No, not at all. That was, I didn't really date anyone until like halfway through college for the most part, but certainly no, we, at least me, some of the other guys were more well-adjusted and normal in that sense, but me personally, it did nothing to help me in that world, but I was okay with it. I think I was always like socially awkward and uncomfortable enough where I wasn't too broken up about not having all the girls that I didn't really care about in my school. I
was going to say there couldn't have been. How many were there? There was like a dozen.
Yeah, I don't know. It was, again, it wasn't about the glory so much as it was about the fun and the process, I suppose.
So, okay. So you're in high school, and then, you're in this band. You seem like the kind of guy who would have been a decent student, but maybe I'm wrong.
Decent would be would be a nice way of putting it. I was like a C student, I would say. Sucked at math, not so good at science. Really liked reading and writing. I was like an okay student, but definitely not enough to. I went to like a state school from there, which is about as good as I could do grade wise.
So wait, where'd you go?
I went to the University of Southern Maine, here, basically in Portland. And I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do out of high school. So it was one of those situations where my parents didn't go to college. So they were of the mind that we damn well better plan on going to college no matter what, because they didn't. So we had to. So, and all my older sisters were kind of a little more straight-laced, better students than me. So I was expected to go right to college, even though I had no idea what I wanted to do, which I know is a fairly common set of circumstances. So I ended up, just moving down to USM undeclared. And eventually I settled on the media studies sort of focus. But I was not a great student, I would say.
Was college fun?
Yeah, somewhat. I lived on campus for a year in this town called Gorham. USM is based in Portland, and this other town called Gorham. But, it was fun. I met some friends, started taking some classes, like, film classes and writing classes that were interesting and I think meant something to me. And then I lived, in apartments for the rest of college and got a little bit more involved with the art scene in Portland and kind of started way back then, which is, I guess, about 20 years ago now. But college was pretty fun. It wasn't like a typical, like, it was more of like a kind of a commuter experience, not like an on-campus experience, I would say, for the most part. But I made a lot of like good friends and learned some stuff that I thought was pretty important that has stuck with me in terms of just the arts and what I would end up devoting my life and time to.
But you're a social worker.
Now I am. So I graduated college 2009 and was dating someone who was in film school. And so they were moving to LA, actually. So I decided to give it a shot and go out to LA with her. And that was in 2009. It was like the very much the peak of that recession. So I moved to LA and couldn't find a job for the life of me, doing anything at all. So I was there living in Hollywood, on right by the Ralphs on Sunset, I think.
I used to live right over there. The Rock and Roll Ralphs.
Exactly, the Rock and Roll Ralphs. I remember that. And I had to move home after like 4 months or something because I ran out of money and couldn't find a job. So that relationship kind of fizzled out because she stayed there, and which was fine. It ended up being obviously just a natural progression of things. So I ended up back in Portland. Essentially, I lived with my folks for a couple months, and I got a job in a restaurant, and that was my life for the next 13, 14 years, working in restaurants, front of house. Being a waiter? Yeah, bartending, waiting tables, you name it. Lots of it for way too long. And up until very recently, that's what I was doing. And like it was last summer, I finally made the switch to doing social work. And it was probably the greatest personal move, like choice/move I've made in many years. It was a hugely important personal thing to finally get out of restaurants and into something that felt like I was doing something that mattered and felt good.
Okay, so 2 questions. First of all, how did you do it? And then, like, why social work?
I had spent a couple years volunteering at a women's shelter in the kitchen. So I had a sort of an idea of like what it was like to work in that world. And I always thought that it was something maybe I'd be interested in doing. I was just kind of scared it was intimidating to stop doing what I'd been doing for so long. Working in restaurants has its benefits. Like the money can be really good. I was working 4 days a week for many years and I got really used to that. and just kind of like flexibility for doing other things like music stuff. The bands that I would play in throughout my 20s, we would do, some regional touring here and there. And it was just nice to just have a job or to have jobs that didn't really matter that much, honestly. And I don't know, my family always just thought that they never thought I had a real job like throughout all of my 20s and early 30s. Even though, restaurant work is hard work, it wasn't, I wasn't taken seriously as an adult, I feel like, which is maybe unfair of me to say that that's how they thought of me. But so anyway, I worked in restaurants for way too long, got burned out. The pandemic obviously made that really weird too. One of my really good friends has worked for the city of Portland for many years, and he was always trying to get me to go work there. He would tell me I'd be great. He would send me job openings for years at this office that he worked at. And last summer, he once again sent me a job posting, and I just went for it, and I got the job. And it was a big deal for me personally.
That's great. And so what do you do? Like, what does a social worker do? Like, what is your day to day?
I guess my technical job title would be human services counselor. I work in Maine. There's a program called General Assistance. I think other states have it too, but Maine is actually known for having some of the best social services in all of the country. So I work for the General Assistance Office in Portland, and that's where people go to get help with rent and utilities and food vouchers and medications primarily. But the main thing we do is rent. So people who have no other means to pay their rent come to our office. They have to be found eligible based on their income. And that's pretty much what we do. And my job is more of an administrative kind of like customer facing job where I do deal with a lot of emails, phone calls, checking people in, scheduling, that kind of stuff. But it's by far the biggest. Like I said, every town in Maine has its own general assistance office per state law, but the Portland one is by far the biggest one. And we, it's thousands and thousands and thousands of families and clients rely on us for rent. And it's a great program, and it's like many things in this country now. There's some question marks floating around about, how long it's gonna be a viable option for people. But we're just doing our best to keep helping people and hope that it sticks around.
It's got to be really hard to be a homeless person in Maine in the winter. Like that's not viable. Like you can't survive out there.
Yeah, we have, I think, 4 different shelters. There are hardly any other shelters in the state of Maine. So people from all over the state come to Portland, and our shelters are usually full. We do our best. But the homeless issue has gotten pretty dire here, frankly, and it's really sad. But on a personal level, it feels good to go to work every day and feel like you're kind of doing my part to chip away at that as best I can, which feels better than going to work in some restaurant and make some guy some money, who you work for, you don't really, care that much about. But yeah, it's humbling work. And it also just, one of the benefits is just seeing in real time people go from not having a place to live to having a place to live, and being a part of making that difference feels really good.
I bet. And I'm curious too, you said that there's kind of like a means testing process that has to happen. If somebody comes in asking for help with rent, you have to make sure that they actually need the help. How often is it the case that somebody comes in asking for help with rent who isn't eligible?
It's very common. You have to have no other money. If you come in for assistance and you have $500 in the bank and you're coming to get help paying your rent, we will ask you to go use that $500 towards your rent, bring a receipt back, and then you'd be found eligible. It's emergency funds for when it's like the last, it's a safety net program, basically. So you truly have to have, there's a threshold, but it's for people who really don't have anything else. And there are plenty of those people.
So you have to be at zero.
More or less. There's also job search requirements. You have to be looking for a job. If you can't look for a job for medical reasons, you just need confirmation from doctors. It's actually a very elaborate eligibility process, and it does take work to prove that you are in need, and to the extent that you need to be found eligible. But it is quite common for people to not be found eligible. A lot of times it's just paperwork that you have to go bring back, bank statements. If someone's paying your phone bill, who's a friend, you have to show every dollar has to be accounted for, because it's a state-run program with taxpayer money. So there's a lot of politics involved too, but it truly is designed to be a safety net for people who have nothing else.
Yeah. I mean, are people ever rude? Like, do you ever get people who are like angry and just like kind of at the end of their rope?
All the time. Yeah. I will say that landlords are the worst people to deal with in my job. No doubt about it. And I don't have to get into that, but the people who are the most frustrating aren't the people who are in need themselves for the most part. It's people who are maybe not doing their part to help these people from their vantage point the way that they should be, without getting too specific. But yeah, we deal with a lot of really high intensity sort of dramatic situations with all kinds of different people, a lot of substance issues, a lot of mental health issues with clients. But Portland has really robust social services, that tons and tons of people working really hard to help these people as best we can. And that's why people from all over the state flock down to our city, because we're the only ones who can, some of the only places that can like truly assist. And in fact, people from other states are always calling us being like, I'm going to come to Maine because I heard that the social services are so good. And we're just like, please don't. We can't, like, we already can't help the people that are already here. So that can be difficult as well.
So what have you learned? I mean, because you're seeing people at a really vulnerable place. It's got to be very, it could be humiliating. It's painful to have to need that kind of help. And then, like you say, there are people who are struggling with addiction and mental illness, and you're kind of meeting them at a very low point. Like, what has it taught you to do that kind of work?
Well, I would say a very high, I would say the majority of the people we assist are like new Mainers, asylum seekers. So they're new, and a lot of them don't speak English. And it's, you hear some pretty horrific things about the situations that people are escaping to, so you're really feeling for people a lot in that regard. But also just in general, it's some people, more people than you would think, are one paycheck away from being there at any given time.
Well, I read these statistics, and it's like, I want to say 60% of Americans could not survive a $1,000 emergency.
Exactly. So it's not, it's all kinds of different people are seeking out these services all the time. It's truly, it's scary that so many people are in the situation where they need to come see us. But it's kind of like, a couple of things could go wrong in my life and I might be right there with them, like a lot of people would say the same, I would think.
It's unsustainable.
Yeah.
Like, I feel that. And I'm just like, how could we be here? Where some people have so much, and 60%, I mean, that's a lot of people. 60% of 300 million is what, 180 million people, something like that, who couldn't survive a $1,000 emergency.
Yeah. it's when we look at the numbers of the amount of money that we've assisted people with at my job, it's pretty astounding, but it's also really something to be proud of. I think as a, I think, as a state, like currently, up till recently, again, like I said, who the hell knows how things are going to turn out with a lot of these social services, especially, I mean, places that we work with, other organizations that are federally funded, we're already seeing fallout from that. One of the family shelters that we work with closed because their funding got cut off, and so we're trying to find housing for those people, and it's crazy. It's truly it's pretty harrowing to see that every day. But I found that I'm able to kind of compartmentalize that stuff and just do the work and do as best as I can and not be too like emotionally sort of jilted by it. My partner also works in social services, so we often at the end of the day are kind of comparing stories, and that's a the world is so full of people struggling. It's really sad, but and it's kind of hard to wrap your head around the enormity of it. But being a part of something that's trying to chip away at that has made an impact on my life, and even in the past 9 months.
Like mental health wise, you mean?
Yes, I would say I was very, very anxious and dissatisfied and unhappy with where I was at in my professional life, and just making that career switch. I kind of was like, I should have done this years ago, but the important thing is that I did it at all. But yes, I would say my mental health has improved since starting working in this line of work, for sure.
And you mentioned your partner. So are you married or just dating, or?
We live together. We're not married. She's your biggest fan in the world, I would guess.
Is that how this happened? That's how this happened. You're like, this is how I got roped into this.
Well, no, I mean, yes, but I was happy to do it. I will note that I'm honored to be on the same podcast as George Saunders, who is I would say probably my favorite current writer, and I really enjoyed the episode you had with him. But anyway, yes, my partner is yes, we live together. We've been together for 5 or 6 years, give or take, and she's great. And we have a beautiful home here in the West End in Portland, and we have a dog, and we're very happy.
What's your dog's name, and what kind of dog is it?
Her name is Scuba. She is a pit bull husky mix. Some people call them pitskis, and she's delightful. We love her so much.
Oh yeah, those are good dogs. I feel like pit bulls get a bad rap.
Absolutely, yeah. They from the rescue place that we found her from, they do everything they can not to call them pit bulls. They're like, it's an American Bulldog Lab mix, and we're like, this is a pit bull, but okay, we get it, because people don't want to adopt pit bulls. We actually did a DNA test, and that's how we found out about the husky thing, which we thought was very cute. But she's an amazing dog. Do you have any dogs?
Yeah, she's right behind me. You probably can't see her. She's back right there, but she's a part dachshund, part boxer, part pit bull. I mean, it's like everything basically. Mm-hmm. She's really high strung. She's from Tijuana. Okay. That's where she was rescued from. And she's a great hiking buddy, though, and she's a sweetheart. But she's got a little bit of an edge to her. But that's to be expected. She was kind of born, I think, into a litter of 11 puppies, and then abandoned in like an alley. Yeah, and then eventually found. So she had a rough start.
For sure, yeah. Our dog was abandoned in Florida among the gators, because that's apparently something that happens down there. People who don't want their dogs just let them loose in gator land, which is horrific. But she was rescued, thank God. It's one of those things where we talk about kind of like being so curious about like what her past was like. Not that we could probably emotionally handle actually knowing the specifics of it, but at the same time, without that story of hers, she wouldn't have ended up with us. So we're also thankful for that. But yeah, everyone should be rescuing dogs.
I was just going to say, if you're going to get a dog, rescue a dog.
Yeah,
It's a good experience.
it is. And it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. What is it? What do they say? Don't shop, adopt. I think that's the phrase.
Yeah, I have opinions about that, but specific people in my life are not following that advice, and it's a little frustrating, but I won't get into specifics about that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to, every dog needs a home and so on, but there's just the shelters are usually full. A lot of dogs are getting euthanized. It's just, it seems like an obvious thing to do, but, so where are you spiritually?
I don't know. I think I wouldn't say that I am an atheist necessarily. I wouldn't even know if I would say I'm agnostic either. I'm certainly not church going. I think I find spirituality in just the arts and my experience just consuming and creating art. And I think that that's how I sort of gauge where I'm at in that sense of things. Just sort of the spirit of culture and creativity, I feel like is what is the most inspiring to me. Whereas, my dad was, I don't really come from a religious background at all, but I feel like if you asked my dad that, he would say like a similar answer, except his version would be the outdoors. Like my dad would get all of his sort of inner peace and perspective on the world and life just from being in nature. I feel that way, except it's just being immersed in like film and music and reading.
Except you're not like hunched over a hole in the ice and like sub-freezing temperatures.
Right. I mean, there's something to be said about fresh air, but freezing your ass off isn't everyone's idea of a good time. But I think just I can't say like a spirit, like spiritually, I can't put my finger on like something traditional in that sense, but I do feel that I can sort of connect with the world in a spiritual way, I guess, through the things that I mentioned.
Well, and you mentioned that you lost your dad, what, like 4.5, 5 years ago?
Yeah.
It's like obviously tough. Like I'm just wondering, like in a spiritual context, like making sense of death and loss and like what happens or what doesn't happen after we die. Like, do you have a sense of that?
Well, depending on, I think that when there's a enormous piece to people's earthly lives ending, no matter how it happens. I believe that they're in a more peaceful place. Watching my dad die was, over the course of some very short, intense months of illness, was profound impact, traumatic, awful experience. But literally watching him die with, my sisters and mom surrounding him in our house, that moment, something spiritual was happening that felt very comforting. His suffering was over, but there was a presence in the room that was real and meant something. So I don't know where it goes from there, but I have good feelings about what's in store for people when their lives on Earth are over.
That's nice. I've heard that before. Like people who have been like witness to those moments with a loved one and how there can be like kind of like a holy aspect to it all and like a surprising degree of like, I don't know if serenity is the right word, but some level of peace. I mean, it's mixed with a lot of other things too, but
yeah,
that's a part of it.
I mean, knowing that their suffering is finally over is a huge part of it, but it's not just the suffering of illness. It's the suffering of, being a human being. There's a lot of great things about being human, but it's also really hard on the soul. And it's, it felt like, I don't know, you're kind of at the finish line and you did it. And I in a weird way, but yeah, serenity is, it's close to what I'm trying to get at, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I would say it was a very spiritual moment when that happened.
Did it change you in some fundamental way? Because like sometimes these things happen, and it's like it's powerful, and there is like a resonance to it. It stays with you to a degree, but then time goes by, and like you kind of revert to like the mean. You know what I'm saying? Like, did you carry forward something? Are you like less fearful of death now? Do you have a greater degree of peace or self-understanding or something?
I think that watching that happen is something I'll never forget. And it is something that I'll remind myself of often, even if I'm not trying to think of that. I do think about that moment a lot. There is I would say, a very mild sort of distant comfort to it. Not that I hope that's anything that I personally experience for a long time from now, but I think the end of suffering for any individual is ultimately a good thing. That is that there's kind of there's no way around it for anybody, and it's that in itself, I think, is kind of knowing that there's that peace for everyone is kind of comforting. So I feel like just that moment did change me sort of in that way, where I felt like I feel like now I have more of an understanding of sort of the larger picture, I guess.
So what you said your dad had an illness, was it cancer or?
Yeah. He actually had cancer twice. About 10 years before he died, he had a different kind of cancer. And then it was awful. It was right at the beginning of the pandemic, May 2020. So it was about 5 years ago, like right now, that we found out he was sick. By that point, we knew something had been wrong with him, but by the time they diagnosed it, it was stage 4 urothelial cancer, which is a cancer of the lining of the kidneys. And yeah, they gave him 5 months, and that's about how long he lasted after that. So it was very rapid, but it was also just like right in the meat of the first few months of the pandemic. So that just made everything that much more difficult in terms of social distancing. And, it was just like awful. Like we had to be around and see him and do things for my mom. But there was this constant sort of anxiety about like, are we going to get, is COVID going to enter the picture and complicate things, make him more sick, make my mom sick? So there was a lot of just really awful anxiety just because of that element on top of everything else. So it was a really rough time.
That's a crucible.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a crucible for all of us on some level, but to have to be dealing with that inside of that, plus your restaurant life is suddenly evaporating and you want to get out of it anyway, but that's a transformation on its own that can bring a lot of stress. So like the last few years have been big for you. Definitely.
Yeah. That was a rough couple of years. And I feel like the last couple of years I feel like I've been doing quite well. Just, I'm still, I still feel oftentimes that I'm in like the blast radius of that really bad time. But I've felt the last 2 or 3 years that I've been kind of working my way out of it, and hopefully, coming out stronger on this end. But I was very lucky that, my family, we all get along and we all are pretty nearby. So my sisters and mom were all there for each other throughout that whole experience, which made it a lot easier. And I'm happy to say that everyone's in the family is doing pretty well now. And my mom, including my mom, who my parents had just retired like the year before all this happened. So that was really sad. They had these retirement plans, and they're kind of looking at the last, couple decades of their life together. And that just sort of like the rug was pulled out under them. Especially for, that idea went away, but my mom has done really well since, and she's has a thriving social life. I would say more than even than any of us kids do, because she has time and energy to do things that she never had before. So that's been nice to witness.
How old was your dad when he died?
My dad was 66 and I was 33. So I was the age that he was when I was born, and exactly half his age. So that felt significant in some way at the time too.
Like kind of like symmetry.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you have like any kind of like grand dream, like some dream for your life that you're hoping to realize, or no? I mean, you don't have to have one, but I'm just curious, like, is there something driving you, or is there some dream that you have or had?
I want to stay as comfortable and happy as I can for as long as I can. I love, I would say the main thing I do is make music, and I'm very busy with that. And I've been involved with the local music scene here in Portland for a long time. It's always nice it would be nice to have a little bit more, just slightly more recognition for things. But I know a lot of, that's maybe asking for too much. But, I don't know. I'm happy making music. Sometimes it can be frustrating that I've felt like I put my whole life into this practice and this art. And it would be nice if I was doing that for work a little bit. But the older I've gotten, the more I've sort of accepted that I'm not doing it for anything but just my own just journey and artistic sort of satisfaction. But that being said, it would be nice to be able to do a little bit more artistic stuff in a more professional sort of setting. But I'm generally not asking for, I just want to have a good life where I can keep creating things, staying healthy, staying happy, keeping a roof over my head. I would say in this day and age in this country, that's kind of, you shouldn't be asking for too much more than that, because who knows what's going to be coming down the line just in general. And it's very scary out there. So I guess the dream would be just for things to continue in a way that I guess they currently are for me personally.
Until Carlisle reunites and plays Carnegie Hall.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how often my family members make jokes exactly like that. They could care less about the music I'm doing right now, but they love to talk about Carlisle.
What is the name of? Can you share the name of your current band, or do we want to protect the innocent? I
mean, anyone in Maine who's hearing this would be pretty easy to figure out who I was. I've been in a number of bands throughout the years, but if I'm allowed to say the name of the band, actually, my partner and I, who is the reason I'm here again, we have a band together now called Finger Food. And we just put a record out less than a week ago. So wow. I'd be remiss to not get that plug in there if it's allowed.
Yeah, I will allow a Finger Food plug here at the tail end of our dialogue. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate the time. It's been really great to meet you, and kudos to you for all that you have going on. It's cool to hear about.
Thank you, Brad. Likewise. Thanks for talking to me. This was fun.
Okay, there we have it. That was my conversation with Tyler, age 38, a social worker from Portland, Maine. That was good, huh? There was something innately good about that exchange. I enjoyed it greatly. I hope you did too. Thanks to Tyler for talking with me, and thanks to you for listening. And once again, if you're out there and you're thinking to yourself, wow, I know somebody who would be a perfect guest for Brad Listi in this new character study series, email me. The address is letters@otherppl.com. I need your help in this capacity to keep this series rolling on Sundays. So what else? Don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't done that already. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen. You can also subscribe on YouTube. Follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram and Bluesky. Sign up for my weekly email newsletter over at Substack, bradlisti.substack.com. Join the Other People Patreon community if you love me. It's patreon.com/otherpplpod. And be sure to check out my new company. It's called Deep Dive, and it will be launching later this year. www.deepdive.audio. It's just a landing page, but you can sign up for the Deep Dive newsletter. Follow Deep Dive on Instagram and Bluesky. And what else? Oh, give this show a rating, please, wherever you listen. Rate it, review it. Apple Podcasts, Spotify. That helps the show find new listeners. And if you're on Spotify, you can leave comments on episodes. Did you know that? The more comments, the better. I do check the comments. So if you want to comment on Spotify, that's a thing. All right? Okay, so coming up on Tuesday, I will be joined by Jonathan Evison. He is a returning champion. He was my first ever guest on this show, believe it or not, almost 15 years ago, episode 1. He has since appeared on this show multiple times, and he's back again. He is celebrating the publication of another novel. It's called The Heart of Winter, critically acclaimed, selling lots of copies. If you haven't heard Jonathan Evison in conversation before, you need to experience this. And you will get your chance on Tuesday. Stay tuned.